So my wife has been theorizing the whole time that we've been watching that Grace was the killer. And obviously there are some reasons to suspect that. Some of you have brought them up in the comments, how we see these visions of Jonathan having an affair, and we see the murder in Grace's visions. And the question, of course, is if she's just imagining that or if it's actually her suppressing the memory of it. And of course, this episode, we get some indication that it could be the latter. Now, I don't think that Grace is the killer for a number of reasons, but based on the economy of characters, I would guess that it's either Donald Sutherland's character or Lily Rabe's character. But I do think that this is an interesting wrinkle in the plot. It's an interesting question because you have to ask yourself why Grace is the lead character in this show. It's a similar space to Defending Jacob, where you have this character who isn't really able to take part in the investigation. They're actually, the family member of a suspect. But this show, more than Defending Jacob, is actually focused on solving the murder. Defending Jacob was very much focused on, the effects that an investigation like this would have on the family. And this show isn't not focused on that, but I would say it's a lot more focused on the investigation and on who the actual killer is than Defending Jacob was, because you never really got complete clarity in Defending Jacob, whereas here I think that there's going to be complete clarity by the time that this is all over. But this episode we got to see Grace struggling with whether or not she can trust Jonathan. She knows that he cheated on her. She knows that he's not the person she thought he was, but is he a killer? That's the question she has to keep asking herself. And it would be really challenging in her position, I think, for most of us. Once you find out that your spouse is capable of something that you never imagined, you have to ask yourself, what are they not capable of? And it definitely is hard to believe Jonathan, especially when he keeps clinging to this claim that the woman who died was obsessive and that she was neurotic, when clearly it seems like the situation was very much the reverse of what he's claiming, and that he's just trying to make himself sound as good as possible. Now, we got introduced to the attorneys this episode. We briefly saw the prosecuting attorney and spent more time with the two defense attorneys. First, the public defender, who seems like he's probably not going to be in the series from here on out, played by Douglas Hodge, and the new attorney that Grace is going to bring in to defend her husband, played by Noma Dumezweni. And I have to say, if we're going by the battle of the accents, I think that Douglas Hodge is winning. I felt like Noma is doing a very okay job, but they're both English actors, I believe, and I think that Douglas Hodge, he doesn't quite sound like he's trying to. I think he's trying to pull off a Bronx accent, but I think that he has kind of transformed himself as an actor with this accent, so that's a pretty impressive feat to pull off. Whereas with Noma Dumezweni, I feel like she's doing a good job of doing an American-ish accent, but I feel like there are times where you can kind of hear her natural accent slipping through. But in terms of characters, I think that these are both very, very interesting characters, and I actually wouldn't have minded seeing a little bit more of Douglas Hodge's character. I thought that he had some pretty good zingers this episode, some pretty good one-liners. I thought that particularly the line that he said during his conversation with Hugh Grant's character, where he said, "I prefer guilty clients, actually, because it takes the pressure off." I thought that was a very, very quotable line, and he had some other interesting moments. I think, though, that we're going to be seeing Noma Dumezweni obviously take over the case, and it's going to be interesting to see what her approach is. She says she's going to sling, sludge. She's going to cause problems. She's going to obscure the facts. She's not trying to prove Jonathan innocent. She's just trying to get him off. And, this is, very much something that lawyers do. It's not something that is necessarily something that we want to see happen, but it's the reason we have the legal system the way it is in America is because people are entitled to the best defense possible. So it's going to be interesting seeing her go about her way of defending Jonathan. And this is going to play into the conversation that Grace had with Fernando Alves, played by Ismael Cruz Cordoba, doing a very nice job in this role. I thought the scene where he passed by Grace and just, kind of was avoidant, I thought the way he acted that scene was very compelling. He kind of reminds me of a young Benicio del Toro. I think, though, that very much this scene shows what's going to happen, which is that this victim that was murdered is going to have her name dragged through the muck in order to protect Jonathan. And you see this coming out in the conversation as Grace tries to find out, was she having mental health issues? And it's very sad that this is going to happen. This woman who died, she was a victim regardless of anything else. And to have her further victimized in the effort to defend Jonathan is going to be something that really shouldn't happen. But the big twist this episode, and this is where we see that why Grace is the protagonist perhaps, is that she was near the site where the woman was murdered. And this becomes interesting because we've noticed Joe kind of acting oddly towards Grace. I took that to be him, not being entirely sure, whether she was trying to protect her husband or not, or whether he could trust her. But obviously this was an indication that he suspects her and doesn't know. Both her and Jonathan have very, very strong motives. So which of them did it? Obviously, I don't think it's her, because if it was her, they kind of revealed this rather early. I don't think they would have revealed that it could have been her until the last episode. But it does put another wrinkle in the proceedings. Donald Sutherland had a really good dramatic scene this episode when he revealed that he had given money to Jonathan. And Donald Sutherland, I think he's one of those actors, one of the few actors of his generation who has managed not to overstay his welcome. I think that, there's a lot of other great actors, like Michael Caine, for instance, great actor, but he's done so many roles lately that I think he's kind of become overexposed and he just has dulled his impact as an actor, I think. Whereas Donald Sutherland, I think he's managed to, keep his roles a little bit more selective, so when he does something like this, it doesn't feel like, oh yeah, whatever, I mean, he's in everything. And here, his acting during this scene where he, he comes to tears as he explains what he had been doing and how he's trying to protect his daughter, which could be motivation for him having had this woman killed. We just don't know yet. But to me, the fact that he's always going to try to protect Grace no matter what, and Jonathan said very, very clearly this episode that this woman was a threat to their family, to me that could indicate that he had something to do with her death. We'll have to wait and see. My biggest reason for suspecting him is it's Donald Sutherland, and based on the economy of characters, you don't cast someone like Donald Sutherland without a good reason. Obviously, we found out that the daughter that, Fernando Alves is taking care of is actually Jonathan's daughter, which, how that's going to play out going forward. It seems like a random, kind of a soapy detail at the moment, but maybe that's going to play into things more in the future. But it is, just a sad revelation for Grace's character and further distancing her from her husband, Jonathan. We had some interesting scenes with Jonathan in prison. Hugh Grant wasn't as impactful again as he was in the premiere. I found that episode the most interesting because we got to see him, showing how he would show to most people before everything changed. I think it was interesting to see the glimmers of darkness there. But this episode, we see him completely out of his element in prison. And, it's kind of a funny thing. When Hugh Grant was first starting his career, a lot of people were like, oh, he could be a really big actor. Look at how successful he's been in these romantic comedies. And the big question was, can he carry a gun? Because people realized if he can't do action movies, if he can't have that kind of career, he's not going to be a movie star. And of course, he really couldn't. So that kind of comes into play in my thinking about this episode because, he's in a fight scene, he's in a prison environment, he, bites someone's finger pretty brutally. It's just not terribly convincing with Hugh Grant, though. I don't think anyone could convince me that Hugh Grant was going to win a fight in a prison yard. But his performance this episode, particularly in his scene with his son, played by Noah Jupe, who was also very, very good here. I feel like those scenes were very strong, and it does, kind of leave this lingering question of how bad a man is he? He's clearly in denial about himself, and he's clearly not, taking full responsibility for his own actions, and it's going to be interesting to see if he can do that. But I appreciated that they sidestepped cliches with Noah Jupe's character, the way that he reacted. I expected him to turn on his mother after she called the police on Jonathan, but he hasn't done that. And on top of that, the way he said that, we will never be a family again, it's just heartbreaking watching this poor child's life ripped apart by the decisions of his father. So those are my thoughts on this episode of The Undoing, Do No Harm, third episode of the season. Sorry it's a little late coming out. I've just been swamped, 2 kids now, so... But if you're interested in seeing more reviews like this one and of other upcoming shows, please consider subscribing. Thanks for watching.